I'm definitely not a traditional business owner. I tend to do things that feel good, that feel organic, that make me feel a certain way.
So tell me a little bit about how it got started. Like, what was the first thing that you did to get Sincerely Tommy off the ground?
Yeah, I was 16 when I found my first retail job, and I knew it was something that I wanted to do. So I was there for many years. I started as an intern and then eventually left as an assistant buyer because I was just like, I can't work for someone else anymore. I literally went to my grandmother, who is in real estate, and approached her with this business plan for Sincerely Tommy. She had no idea what a lifestyle concept store was, but she really believed in my vision.
You were saying that you had a business plan. What did that consist of? Like, in retrospect, did it have all the pieces that you needed?
It actually did. I was pretty impressed with myself. I went to college to study fashion merchandising and started going to the business library here in New York and just reading like business writing for dummies and meeting with a mentor there who really helped me put my business plan together. I had an Excel sheet for everything, whether it was the literal build out of the space to how much I needed to buy product, how much I needed to survive the first year. And a lot of this was just me learning as I went. But I will say it came in handy. Like I had a vision, but having this kind of roadmap was really helpful. I just had something to refer back to.
Yeah. And so, how did you figure out what numbers to put in the cells?
Yeah, well, I was clever. And this came from working in retail, something I did not learn in college, but I knew that a lot of small boutiques would carry things on consignment. And so I started that off for buying actual brands and product.
Yeah. Well, for people who don't know what consignment means, can you explain what that process is like and why that's important for you as a small business?
Yeah. Consignment is just basically when a brand or a line decides to give you their product without an upfront cost or payment. And as the item sells, you pay them either their wholesale costs, but it's a really good way to kind of test your market, especially if you're a new business and you're not sure if something would actually sell. And I know a lot of stores opt for that route, especially now.
Yeah. You're making sure that you have cash flow, essentially, because that's the hardest thing about retail is you're not really quite sure when this is going to pay out. You're also trying to make your audience and build your business too. So having that flexibility of not buying $40,000 worth of inventory when you just started.
Yeah.
So,
and I have to say, even hearing you say that, like that was something that intimidated me early on because I was like, well, if I buy 3 smalls and 4 mediums and only one of each sells, I'm just left over with this extra stock that I have to mark down and I'm losing money. And so again, consignment really comes in handy because you have the flexibility to say, I'm just going to do one of each size. And if it doesn't sell, I don't owe money. If it does sell, then I now have the cash in hand to be able to pay the designer. And for everything else, I would just go online and research, like, how much does the POS system cost? Like all of those things and just using it as your overall guideline. But again, those costs are very subject to change because you just can't account for things as they come up. But I think knowing that I was going to carry a lot of brands on consignment really helped me save a lot of the budget that I had allotted. And it worked out for them as well because it created this relationship between me as a new business owner and them as a new brand. And so I created my own contract where it was like, let's test this out for 3 months. If it works out, I'll just start buying outright wholesale. If it doesn't, then we tried it.
right. So from the beginning of your business plan, your grandmother, is she an investor? Like, how does she fit in with Sincerely Tommy?
Oh, she's absolutely an investor. She not only gave me the physical space to do it, but she gave me a loan to be able to open the business. She and my mother, actually, they were the only two investors that I took on. And it wasn't like a huge amount of money. Again, I referred to the business plan. I knew that I needed X amount of dollars, and I budgeted as much as possible. But yeah, she's an investor in the space.
When you opened the doors, what was that like? What were the things that was more surprising in terms of opening a business?
With renovations, it's constant, unexpected surprises. And we were really blessed because the contractor who did the space, he was a godsend, to be honest.
Oh.
Like literally, which is something you almost never hear about contractors. And he really just let me design and create what I wanted to. And so when we actually opened, it was like, wow, this building that was literally abandoned is now this like work of art. I have to say, I was really nervous because when I opened, we were maybe one of 2 or 3 businesses that were fairly new to Tompkins, and we're still talking like the beginning of gentrification, and so things are a bit tense, and everyone's kind of like, what are these new businesses opening? Do we feel comfortable going in there? And so I really had to project like, no, I'm from this neighborhood. I was born and raised here. My family was born and raised here for the most part. And I want this space to be somewhere that like young creatives feel comfortable coming in, asking questions, contributing their work, their art. And so that was just something that was constantly pushed. And I think you feel that when you open the doors.
And so now the business is open, ready for customers.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was very surreal. I think this again was like, maybe Instagram was about 4 years old. People were just like figuring out how to use it branding wise. And so I never expected to be so well received by press, by social media. And I think it just continued to give us foot traffic, give us notoriety. And ST really, really became this destination spot for not only locals, but like we had people who were on a trip from Japan or London or wherever, and they were like, I had to come visit. And I'm like, what? Okay. And it was just so unexpected, but I was so reaffirmed. Wow, this vision, this thing that I manifested, like it's showing me how much power we have when we really have a vision and we believe in that vision.
Yeah. And was there anything in the beginning that kind of was unexpected as a retail owner that you were just like, dang?
I mean, that's kind of like every day. I will say the first 5 years, staffing was definitely the biggest hurdle. Just trying to find reliable, responsible team members and also being taken seriously because like you said, I was young when I opened this business. I still am young, but I think when you're hiring people that are the same age as you, kind of establishing a healthy rapport where they take you seriously, but also like trust that you know what you're doing, even if you're new at it too, was just something that I was constantly learning from. And after 7 years, I can say that I finally have a team of people that have been with me for about 2 years that I trust, love, but it takes a lot of work because you're also finding your own rhythm and you're learning to let go of certain responsibilities that you probably never imagined handing over to someone else.
Especially with retail, you need a lot of help. And it's so customer facing and you're also doing something new. So what are things that you look for or things that are red flags when you're hiring?
That's a great question. I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to the interview process. Like, I still look for resumes. I expect you to come dressed or presented a certain way because you're telling someone who you are through this first meeting, essentially. And so my main question is usually, what do you know about this business? Because just through hiring, I've realized that if you're unfamiliar with ST as a brand, you most likely have no interest in helping us grow. And so if someone has researched either me or ST. That's a good starting point. It's so fascinating because sometimes people will send in a link to their Instagram and I'm like, is this what we're doing now? That's all that we need is an Instagram handle? Wow. Like, I remember having to write a cover letter and like really work on my resume. But okay. So I look for all of those kind of little things that maybe sometimes people don't think are as important as our expectation shift of what being in the workplace is. And I get it, but those things always matter. And sure enough, the team that I have are all people who were very familiar with ST, have all implemented their own personalities and creative abilities into the space. Like, I have a photographer, a fashion designer, and they all have their own successful brands on the side, but see this space as just being very conducive to how they're working and their lifestyle. And I realized that instead of approaching this as you're coming to work for me, like, no, you're part of my team. We're team members all together. And in order for me to take a step back, I need to feel like it's a mutual relationship, a give and take. And so my view on that certainly changed. I wasn't always like that.
Well, so let's do a little role playing here. So
Yeah.
What would be the most perfect or the best cover letter that you could receive?
I would probably say someone who I think shares the vision for their own life and where they want to go, and then share why they think they'd be an asset to a business like Sincerely Tommy. Those are questions I always ask in an interview. I remember the last intern that I hired, who was incredible. In her cover letter, she covered that, but in her email too, she was very adamant and kind of had this sense of ownership that was kind of like, I want an interview. I think I had to reschedule the interview because of my son's school schedule. And she emailed me back and was kind of like, I understand you're busy. I would have appreciated more notice. And I think some people would have seen that and been like, excuse me? But I was like, no, she's actually right, because I have to respect her schedule too. And so that turned me on to want to hire her. I was like, okay. And she ended up being like amazing. I wish she was still with us, but she's in her last year of school. But I look for people who just take themselves seriously too, because if you have that energy about yourself, then you're going to apply that into this business as well. I like leaders, take initiative. This is a small business. We don't necessarily have the same resources as a bigger company. So every little bit counts. And so that's something that I look for in cover letters and interviews, in personality, energy.
Yeah. And so did you initially begin with multiple businesses? Because Sincerely Tommy has lots of different aspects of it, or did that happen as you got the retail store up and going?
So I opened ST with the cafe, and I actually was subleasing the cafe to this couple who had a cafe in Jersey City, and they were there for maybe about a year. And then I decided that I just wanted to take that space over myself, and I did. And I felt like I had more ownership and say on what was being sold. And so that's where I think the two kind of merged, because it was separate before. It was like Lackawanna Coffee and Sincerely Tommy, and people were confused. But that wasn't something that I knew. And I also did that because in the business plan, I was like, whoa, an espresso machine? Where's the money for that coming from?
People don't realize how expensive espresso machines are.
And I think that was a smart business decision, because in the end, the guys who I subleased the cafe space to were not only having to pay rent, but I bought all of the machinery out once they left, and I got it at a discounted price because now it's used. So that was smart on my end, but
that's like in your business plan. Bring in other people. Wait till it's just slightly used and go.
And it wasn't. I didn't even plan it out like that.
Totally.
But yeah, it worked itself out to be like that. But I think learning the cafe side was definitely a whole new experience. I had no history of working as a barista or the technicalities that go behind it. And so I actually found an amazing manager who's still with me, who literally runs the cafe. I have to give him those props. We have a great relationship, and so I trust him wholeheartedly. The other businesses, they're separate. They kind of came out organically. As most mothers know, that your priority becomes your child or children. And so I started to pivot, and I felt like I needed to just create a more sustainable lifestyle. And that's something that I'm still figuring out, because now we're dealing with this pandemic that has changed everything. And so for me, I'm now approaching things like, what do I see having a long-lasting, sustainable life? That's definitely ST, the brick and mortar.
Was there something that you remember growing up with your grandmother and your mother that they did that you took with you and how you built ST?
Yeah, for sure. I have to bring my father into the conversation with that, because he especially was very intentional about making sure I always practiced self-care and was very independent, because I think he knew that those were real life skills that mattered above all else. And I will say, one of the most important things being a business owner, because it is such a ever-changing and unpredictable career path to take, self-care is so important, and knowing and listening to your body through this path is extremely important as well. And as a mom too, just being able to forgive yourself a lot and not take on like the external things that are happening is a big thing for me. I know how challenging that can be, especially given where we are now. And I think my upbringing has really helped me not get to a point where I'm just like, F this, I'm done.
Right. Because that's an option that you can definitely fall into. What is something that you do that's more tangible for the listeners of how you like reground yourself?
Yeah, I am very intentional about how I spend my time. I'm lucky enough that ST has been in business for 7 years. The first 4 years I was there every day. The first 2 years I was working there every day on top of working a part-time job, because I'm not making money off of this new business. And so slowly but surely I created a routine that worked for me. And now that I'm a mom, my routine has shifted even more. So carving out time that is just for me is extremely important. Every weekend, I have my weekends. My son is with his dad. And so I'll journal, I'll meditate. I'm an earth sign, so I like to be in nature. Taking those moments to reset outside of a city like New York are super important. And if for whatever reason, like maybe someone doesn't have access to leaving when they want to, I think just meditating is so beneficial. Like it is not overrated at all. Like silencing your mind is, oh my gosh.
Yeah.